get these boys paper and pens and so that they can note down these points. Now, what we had discussed was that the Quraysh during those times, they didn't like Prophet, and they used to send their adults and elders to harm the Holy Prophet. The Abu Talib alayhi salatu wasalam used to send Hazrat Hamza to counter them, and then when they send their kids and their children, Hazrat Abu Talib used to send Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. And when none of these worked out for them, they came to trade. They came to trade Rasulullah for someone else. So basically, they were trying hard, and they were trying hard to somehow counter this religion, the progress that Rasulullah was making. But at the end, when they saw that nothing was helping out and nothing was working out for them, they came to a new policy. They adopted a new policy. Now you remember I told you in the previous nights that Rasulullah was famous for, he was Sadiq and Ameen. Okay? These were the two attributes that the Rasul was famous for. What did they do now? There is an ayah in the Holy Quran in Surah Zariyat, ayat number 52, where it says that كَذَلِكَ مَا أَتَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ مِنْ رَسُولٍ إِلَّا قَالُوا سَاحِرٌ أَوْ مَجْنُونَ. This is what was happening during the time of the prophets before Rasulullah. And what they used to do was, when they couldn't do anything, they used to call the prophets Sahir wa Majnoon. Sahir means magician, sorcerer. And Majnoon is a person who is mad, who is insane, who doesn't have intellect, doesn't have the power to think. So what the Quraysh did was they adopted the policy of the people before them, how they countered the holy prophets. Now stay with me. This is what the Quraysh was doing. They were doing. How they wanted to defame Rasulullah. Rasulullah was famous for two attributes. He was Sadiq and Ameen. And they bought these two new things, that the Rasul is Sahir and he is Majnoon. Why? Because Rasulullah was attracting people. And they wanted to show that, no, this person is not in his senses, na'uzubillah, and he's Majnoon, he's Sahir. He will possess you. He will do magic on you. So stay away from him. This is how they came to, they adopted this new policy, and they wanted people not to go close to Rasulullah. Because when anybody came to Rasulullah, he was so polite, he showed high standard of morals and ethics. People started loving him. People started following him. And Quraysh were afraid of this following. So they started to say that he is Sahir and he is Majnoon. Now, this is the verse of the Holy Quran. And this is what was happening during the time of the Holy Prophet. And if you remember, I told you how people later on gave the titles, and they were giving titles of somebody to someone else. This is what was happening. This is how it started. Now the Quraysh, they were doing all this, and they didn't stop here. There are many more things. But now we want to get to a point in history where we see this happening again. This is what was happening during the time of the advent of Islam. Islam was new. Prophet had Abu Talib on his side. But these people came to defame the image of Prophet. And they said he's Sahir and he is Majnoon. Na'udhu billah, he is magician and he is mad. He's insane. Na'udhu billah. This is what they said. Now, yesterday, it was a slip of a tongue, and I, instead of saying Thursday, I said Wednesday. There is a hadith of Qirtas, Yawm al-Khamis. And I was mistaken over there, and I said Wednesday. It was Thursday. And I want to mention it today. What happened that day? Now you keep this in your mind, that the Quraysh, when they couldn't do anything, they wanted to say that the Rasul is, A'udhu Billah, he's insane and he is possessed. What happened on that day? These are the last days of the Holy Prophet. When he's on the bed, he's breathing his last. And Ibn Abbas, he's one of the great companions, famous person in the history of Islam. And he's a good narrator. And even the Sunnis, they believe him. They narrate so many narrations from him. Ibn Abbas, after the demise of the Holy Prophet, he used to sit down with his friends and he used to say, Yawm al-Khamis, Yawm al-Khamis. The day of the Thursday, oh my God, Thursday. And he used to cry. He used to cry out loud. And he used to remember this day and he used to regret what happened on that day. The narration is in Sahih Bukhari, volume 3, and the hadith number is 2888. It is narrated that قال يوم الخميس وما يوم الخميس. Ibn Abbas used to say, Thursday, and you don't know what happened on Thursday. ثم بكى حتى خضب دمعه. He used to cry. He used to cry to this extent that his tears came down on his cheek and on his beard. And he narrated what happened on that day. Now remember what happened on that day. It's very important. And I want to connect those two attributes over here. Something very regretful. Prophet is on his bed and he's telling his companions, there are people in the room, and he's telling his companions to bring him pen and paper so that he can write something for them so that they don't get misguided. They're not misled. And people over there, they started arguing. Let me read out this hadith for you. Okay, I told you I wouldn't mention all the references, but it's important today. It's in Sahih Bukhari, volume 5, Sahih Muslim, volume 3, Muslim ibn Hanbal, volume 1, Tabaqat al-Kubra, volume 2, Bidayah wa Nihaya, volume 5, and I can go on. There are 15 or 14 more references to this hadith. Now listen very carefully what happened that day. You have to remember this. Ibn Abbas is crying over it. What happened? Lamma hudhara Rasulullah, when it was the last few moments of Rasulullah, last few days of Rasulullah, وَفِي الْبَيْتِ رِجَالٌ فِيهِمْ عُمَرَ بْنُ الْخَطَّابِ. There were people in the room of Rasulullah, and amongst them was Umar ibn al-Khattab. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم, the Holy Prophet said, هَلُمَّ أَكْتُبْ لَكُمْ كِتَابًا تَظِلُّ بَعْدَهُ لَا تَظِلُّ بَعْدَهُ. Hurry up, go and bring me a pen and a paper so that I can write something for you. لَكُمْ كِتَابًا لَا تُظِلُّ بَعْدَهُ. Remember these words. لَا تُظِلُّ بَعْدَهُ. Okay, I need you to remember these words. لَا تُظِلُّ بَعْدَهُ. فَقَالَ عُمَرُ. Umar was there. Umar said, what did he say? إِنَّ النَّبِيَّ قَدْ غَلَبَ عَلَيْهِ الْوَجَعُ. The Holy Prophet, I'm saying holy, he didn't say holy. The Prophet, إِنَّ النَّبِيَّ قَدْ غَلَبَ عَلَيْهِ الْوَجَعُ. Indeed, the sickness and the illness has overpowered Rasulullah's intellect and the power to think. Basically, he meant that the person is insane. He don't know what he's talking. And there are different words. In other narration, it's stated that إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَهْجُرُ. He's talking out of his mind. So don't listen to him. If he's asking for pen and paper, don't give it to him. وَعِنْدَكُمُ الْقُرْآنِ. But you have Quran. Why do you want Nabi to write something for you? You have Quran. These are the words of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. وَعِنْدُكُمُ الْقُرْآنِ حَسْبُنَا كِتَابَ اللَّهِ. And the book of Allah is sufficient and enough for us. فَاخْتَلَفَ أَهْلُ الْبَيْتِ. And at that time, people present in the house of the Prophet, they started arguing, they started fighting, فَاخْتَصَمُوا. And they started fighting. مِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ. There was a group who said, قَرِّبُوا يَكْتُبُ النَّبِي لَكُمْ كِتَابًا لَا تَضُلُّ بَعْدَهُ. Why aren't you giving him? قَرِّبُوا means the difference between give him something and bring it closer, there's a difference. There was pen and paper in the room. It's not that there wasn't paper and pen and they need to go and get the paper and the pen. There was paper and pen. The Rawi, the narrator says, قَرِّبُوا. Bring it closer to the Prophet. Let him write what he wants to write. Why aren't you letting him write what he wants to write? قَرِّبُوا يَكْتُبْ لَكُمْ النَّبِي كِتَابًا لَن تَضِلُّ بَعْدَهُ. Let him write what he wants to write so that you don't go astray after him. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ. And there was a different group. وَمَا قَالَ عُمَرُ. And they were saying what Umar said. That don't give him anything. إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَا يَهْجُرُ. So there were two groups in the room of the Holy Prophet. فَلَمَّا أَكْثَرُ اللَّغْوَ وَالْإِخْتِلَافَ عِنْدَ النَّبِي قَالَ الرَّسُولُ قُومُوا عَنِّي. When the fight and the quarrel and the argument went along, Prophet got annoyed, he was furious, he was angry, and he said, قُومُوا عَنِّي. Get away from me, go away from me, leave me alone. And this is what happened in that day. Now you remember these two words. لَا تَضِلُّ بَعْدَهُ وَكِتَابَ اللَّهِ. What happened actually on that day was two important things. One was recalling what the Quraysh and the Kuffar and the Munafiqeen told Payghambar, told the Holy Prophet. What did they say? They said that the Prophet is Sahir wa Majnoon. Sahir and Majnoon. It was getting over. By the time it was getting over, and people said that no, the Prophet is. Remember that day when the Holy Prophet took Hajar Aswad and he put it on the Holy Kaaba? What did the people say? You remember that? I told you the narration. People used to call the Holy Prophet clever. They used to go to the Holy Prophet for their judgments. They considered him a wise person. But these Quraysh, they came and they said, no, he's Sahir wa Majnoon. He's not an intellectual person. He's a possessed and a magician. This is what happened on Thursday in front of the Holy Prophet. That again, this person called the Holy Prophet insane. And this is the policy what the Quraysh in those days, they had this policy. And they wanted to defeminize Rasulullah. And this is what Umar again did. He again revived that title that the Quraysh gave to the Holy Prophet. He said he's Majnoon. He's Sahir. He's not in his senses. Now, see, this is what I'm telling you. How can we follow a person who is insulting and not respecting our beloved Prophet? When you talk about the Holy Prophet and the love of the Holy Prophet, how can one see someone disrespecting and dishonoring the Prophet and still love him? You cannot. So this was the first thing that he copied from Quraysh. The Quraysh, they said the Prophet was Majnoon, and again this person repeated the same thing in front of the Holy Prophet. And it is recorded in the books. The second thing what he did was, he said, Hasbuna Kitab Allah. Now this is very important. Pay attention to this. This was the first time ever a person coined this term, Hasbuna Kitab Allah. And he came with a new policy that we don't need anything else. The book of Allah is sufficient for us. If an innocent person heard this, he might have thought it's a good slogan, it's a good thing to say, Hasbuna Kitab Allah. But it had very, very bad consequences later on. I will tell you what happened. When he said Hasbuna Kitab Allah, you remember these words, right? He said, قَدْ غَلَبَ عَلَيْهِ الْوَجَعُ وَعِنْدَكُمْ قُرْآنٌ وَحَسْبُنَا كِتَابَ اللَّهِ. The person is out of his senses. We have the book of Allah and Hasbuna Kitab Allah. We don't need the Holy Prophet to write anything for us. We have the Holy Book. Why does the Prophet need to write? Now what was actually happening? You remember these words I told you to remember. لَا تَضِلُّ بَعْدَهُ. These are the same and similar words which were in the hadith of Thaqalain. What is the hadith of Thaqalain? Trust me, you will not get this anywhere else. You have to connect these events in the history. You will not find this explanation anywhere else. Write it down, memorize it. The hadith of Thaqalain says, إني تاركم فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وعترتي أهل بيتي ما إن تمسكتم بهما لن تضلوا بعدي أبدا. And the Prophet right now, he's saying, give me something, I'll write it down for you so that لا تضلوا بعده أبدا. They're the same words. People who knew what Rasulullah meant and what he wanted to write. This is why Umar was refraining. And he said, no, don't give him anything to write. Why? Because he knew what Rasulullah wanted to write. He was not a stupid person. He knew what Rasulullah wanted to write. Because he knew that Rasulullah, whenever he said Kitabullah, along with Kitabullah, Rasulullah always recalled his household and said Ahl Bayti. These are the words in the Hadith of Thaqalain. Hadith of Thaqalain was not recorded yet. It was not written. It was only verbal. He was afraid that the Rasul will write it down and make it as his will, and then it will be difficult for us to clean this. That is why he did not allow the Prophet to write it down. He knew it exactly what Rasulullah wanted to say. Because it was the same words that Rasulullah was using. لا تضل بعده. The same words were in the hadith of Thaqalain. لن تضل بعدي أبدا. If you grab onto the Quran and the Ahl Bayt, you will not go astray. You will not be misguided. That is why he said, no, we don't need anything. And he said, Hasbuna Kitab Allah. And this was a big blunder that happened in the history of Islam. And it had devastating consequences later on. What happened actually? This is what he coined the term. He coined this term, and this is the new policy which he introduced to get Muslims away from Ahlul Bayt. And later on in the history, we see during the war of Siffin, the battle of Siffin, what did Muawiyah do? What did he do? Muawiyah basically tore apart the parts of Quran. He raised it on spheres, harpoons. He bought these spheres and he raised the parts of Quran, the pages of Quran on top of his spheres. And he said, this is the Quran. And he bought the Quran against Imam Ali. And he said, you want to be with Quran or you want to be with Ali? Come towards Quran. This is exactly what was happening and what was Muawiyah recalling, that he in those days said, Hasbuna Kitabullah, obey him. This is Kitabullah. Why are you going towards Ali? Come to Kitabullah. This is what is happening actually all through the history. You get my point now? Do you connect these events now? Hasbuna Kitabullah was not only, it did not happen on that Thursday and it was finished. No. Ibn Abbas used to cry because he knew what was going to happen. And this is what is happening. Muawiyah raised the Quran on his face and he said, this is Kitabullah. And Hasbuna Kitabullah. We don't need anything else. We don't need Ali. We don't need Ahlul Bayt. This is the book of Allah and here we are. And this is how he disrespected again the book. He tore the book and he raised it on spears. And later on again in the history we see that Yazid, what did he do? What did Umar do? He said only the book of Allah, no Ahlul Bayt. What did Muawiyah do? He disrespected Quran. He said no Ahlul Bayt, and Quran is also not very important. He raised it on those spheres. And what did Yazid? He finished everything once and for all. He said no Kitabullah, no Ahlul Bayt. He cut off the heads of Ahlul Bayt and raised the head of Imam Hassan on the sphere. This is what is happening. Now you tell me, we don't want to curse anybody. It is simple history. Why we don't follow them? It is not something, it is happening, right? It's not, this Karbala did not happen all of a sudden. Starting is during that Thursday. It happened right in front of Prophet Muhammad. This is why he became annoyed. He said, Qumu anni, go away from me. Because Yazid, he finished everything. This is the encouragement that Yazid got from his forefathers. He saw when this person can accuse Rasulullah of being mad in front of him, then I can do anything I want later on. That is why he's having a cup of wine in his hand. He's sitting on minbar and he's saying, لَعِبَتْ حَاشِمْ بِالْمُلْكِ فَلَا خَبَرٌ جَاءَ وَلَا وَحْيٌ نَزَلْ. Hashim basically played with the state, with the government. There was no malak, there was no book, there was no revelation. This is what Yazid did. This is what we are trying to tell you. This is what we are trying to tell the ummah. That Yazid, yes, now Muslims are getting to know that what Yazid was. But they are still unable to understand what Muawiyah was and what these Khulafa were. How they laid these foundations which led to the martyrdom of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. And later on, it continued to Bani Umayyah and Bani Abbas. And if I get them, I'll point it out. This is what was happening. This is history in front of us. I'm not talking anything sophisticated. This is not rocket science. You place this historical events and things in front of a person, he will come to know what is happening. I am sure you have learned and you have heard all these events taking place. But you need to connect them. You need to analyze them. You need to know from where did they begin. It did not happen all of a sudden. From where did Yazid get this courage to sit in front of Muslimin and say, I don't believe in revelation, I don't believe in Quran, I don't believe in the Prophet. And he killed everybody. This was the enmity towards Abu Talib, towards Hashim, towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then later on, and it's very, very surprising when he says, Inna ar-rajula la yahjur, and don't give him the book. He's actually denying the holy book. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Hashr, verse number 7, he says, وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُ. Take whatever the holy prophets give you and refrain from whatever he forbids you. Take whatever he's asking. Give him whatever he's asking. He's asking for qartas. He's asking for book and a pen, you're not giving it to him. You're actually denying these verses. What type of a Muslim you are? How can you expect us to follow these people? We cannot. We cannot. He's again, there are so many verses. Again, in chapter Surah Najm, ayah 5, from 2 to 5, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا غَوَى وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Your companion, this holy prophet, has neither gone astray nor misled, nor does he speak out of his own desire. It is just a revelation what he speaks of. And you are saying he's insane? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ, and you are saying he's insane? Come on, give it a thought. The Muslim Ummah, reflect on this. Think over it. These are the type of people you are following. And we deny. And we don't want to follow. There are so many verses I don't want to. And one more thing. What happened? I told you, Hasbuna Kitabullah was the biggest blunder, was the biggest mistake, was the biggest, how do I put it, which led the Ummah misguided till today. You know what he did later on? He forbade. Umar, what he did was that he said, people are forgetting Quran, and nobody from today has the right to narrate or to write or to save or protect any narration from the Holy Prophet. This was the era of forbidding hadith, era of forbidding the narration of hadith. It is there in the history. You go search in Google, you will find it. And for 100 years, 99 some years, 100 years, it continued. And you can imagine the immense loss that the Ummah is facing by not getting those true ahadith, which were destroyed, which people were not able to convey and narrate. What we have right now of the fadail of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam is only a handful of what Prophet had told us. Can you imagine? 100 years. 100 years, nobody was allowed to narrate a hadith. This is how they wanted to. Because what basically Rasulullah never, he was not recalling or reciting again and again the whole ayat. No, he was basically trying to connect these ayat with the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is how they wanted to counter the fadail of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. And he said for 100 years, nobody is allowed. And it continued during the era of Muawiyah and later on. This is what was happening during those days. This is why I tell you that we need to think and we need to read the history. We need to go through the pages of historical events and we need to know what the history is telling us. Then we will come to a conclusion that why we are Shia. In fact, you need to come to a conclusion that why you are not a Shia. When we have all these obvious events. I think it's enough for today. I will continue again tomorrow, inshallah. But again, I would like to rectify what I told yesterday. It was not Wednesday. It was Thursday. And I would like to thank my brother Adil. He notified me. And that tells me that people are listening at least. And I would like to encourage my young boys here to come and question and let me know if you are not understanding something. And I'll clarify it. Inshallah, hopefully, inshallah, Parvardigar Alam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlighten our hearts, fulfill our hearts with the love and with the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our deeds and worship and sawm and salat in this holy month. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower His blessings upon all of us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten the reappearance of His last Hujjah. حجة ابن الحسن المهدي الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
अस्सलामु अलैका या अबा अब्दिल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न रसूलिल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न अमीरुल मोमिनीन व इब्न सय्यिदिल वसीयीन, अस्सलामु अलल हुसैन व अला अली इब्न हुसैन व अला औलादिल हुसैन व अला असहाबिल हुसैन जमीअन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैका या गरीब अल गुरबा, सुल्तान अबुल हसन अली इब्न मूसा रज़ा अलैहि अत्तहिय्यतु वल इकराम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना साहिब अल असर व ज़मान, अल अमान अल अमान अल अमान। अस्सलामु अलैका या खलीफतुर रहमान, अस्सलामु अलैका या शरीक अल कुरआन, अस्सलामु अलैका या काबतल ईमान, अस्सलामु अलैका या इमामना व इमामल इंस वल जान। अज्जलल्लाहु तआला फरजक व सहलल्लाहु तआला मखरजक व ज़ुहूरक व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अल्लाहुम्मा कुल्ल वलियकल हुज्जत इब्निल हसन सलवातुका अलैहि व अला आबाए फी हाज़िहि स्साअ व फी कुल्लि साअ वलिय्यन व हाफ़िज़न व काइदन व नासिरन व दलीलन व अईना हत्ता तुस्किनहु अर्ज़का तौआ व तुमत्तिअहु फ़ीहा तवीला। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद।